At my brother's wedding, I found my name scribbled in pen on a napkin next to the kids' table. His wife grinned. "We thought you'd be low maintenance." Then I noticed my $6,800 gift had already been opened. I picked it up, smiled, and declared, "Then you won't mind if I take this back." Her smile faded. "Wait, are you serious?" I, 32M, discovered my family's true colors at my brother's wedding and decided to give them exactly what they deserved. The invitation arrived 3 months before the wedding, elegant cream cardstock with gold lettering. My brother was finally marrying his college sweetheart after 5 years together. I'd been looking forward to this day, genuinely excited to celebrate with family I rarely saw anymore since moving across the country for work. What I didn't expect was to find my name hastily scribbled in blue ballpoint pen on a paper napkin, tucked between 2 6-year-olds at what was unmistakably the children's table. I stood there in my best suit, holding the napkin with my name barely legible in someone's rushed handwriting, watching as my cousins, aunts, and uncles chatted comfortably at the elegantly set adult tables nearby. The kids around me were coloring with crayons and asking where their chicken nuggets were. My sister-in-law appeared beside me with that particular smile women get when they're about to deliver bad news but want to seem pleasant about it. She explained that they'd run short on space and figured I'd be low maintenance about the seating arrangement. After all, I was always so easygoing about everything, and the kids would probably enjoy having an adult to help them with their food. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I processed this. Low maintenance. They'd relegated me to the kids' table because they assumed I wouldn't make a fuss. At my own brother's wedding, while distant relatives and family friends got proper seats with the adults. But what really made my blood pressure spike was what I noticed next. In the corner of the reception hall, on the gift table that was supposed to remain unopened until after the ceremony, I spotted something that made my hands clench into fists. The distinctive packaging of the custom-made watch I'd spent months researching and ordering. The same watch that had cost me $6,800 and 3 weeks of back-and-forth emails with a Swiss manufacturer to get the engraving just right. The box was open. Not just opened, but displayed, with the watch case tilted so everyone could see the expensive timepiece inside. My brother was actually wearing it, showing it off to his groomsmen like some kind of trophy. They'd opened my gift before the ceremony even started, before I'd even found my seat at the kids' table, and were already treating it like their personal property. I walked over to the gift table, my footsteps feeling strangely detached from my body. Several family members were admiring the watch display, and I heard my brother explaining to someone how his brother had excellent taste in gifts. He was beaming, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. I reached for the watch box, my movements deliberate and calm. The room seemed to slow down around me as I picked up the expensive timepiece, feeling its weight in my hands one last time. Then I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes, and announced to the small crowd gathered around the gift table that since they thought I'd be so low maintenance about everything, they surely wouldn't mind if I took this back. The silence that followed was deafening. My sister-in-law's face went through several interesting color changes as she processed what I'd just said. She stammered, asking if I was serious, her voice climbing an octave with each word. The watch was already opened, already being enjoyed. Surely I couldn't just take it back now. My brother appeared at my shoulder, confusion written all over his face as he tried to understand what was happening. He asked what was wrong, why I was acting so strangely. Couldn't we just talk about whatever was bothering me? I explained, very calmly, that I'd discovered my assigned seating arrangement, holding up the napkin with my scribbled name as evidence. I mentioned how thoughtful it was that they'd considered me low maintenance enough to sit with the children while they opened and displayed my expensive gift before the ceremony had even begun. The color drained from my brother's face as he realized what had happened. He started apologizing, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that his wife had handled the seating arrangements and he hadn't known about the kids' table situation. He insisted they could fix this, find me a proper seat, move some people around. But I was already tucking the watch case under my arm, still wearing that smile that was starting to make people uncomfortable. I told him not to worry about it. After all, low-maintenance people don't make scenes at weddings. Low-maintenance people just quietly remove their expensive gifts and leave. My sister-in-law was practically hyperventilating at this point, insisting that the whole thing was just a mistake, that they'd run out of room at the adult tables and had to make difficult decisions. She swore they'd meant no disrespect, that they'd never intended to hurt my feelings. I asked her when exactly they'd opened my gift, since I'd specifically requested it remain sealed until after the ceremony like tradition dictated. The question hung in the air like a challenge, and I watched her scramble for an answer that wouldn't make things worse. She claimed they'd needed to open a few gifts early to make sure everything was properly displayed, that it wasn't personal, that lots of gifts had been opened. But as I glanced around the gift table, I could see that wasn't true. Every other package remained wrapped and sealed. Only mine had been torn open and put on display. My brother was now desperately trying to salvage the situation, offering to buy me dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town, promising to make this right somehow. He kept repeating that I was family, that this was all just a terrible misunderstanding, that surely we could work something out. I reminded him that family was exactly why this hurt so much. Family doesn't stick family at the kids' table while strangers get proper seats. Family doesn't open expensive gifts early just to show them off. Family doesn't assume someone will be low maintenance about being disrespected. The wedding guests were starting to notice the commotion. Whispers rippled through the reception hall as people turned to see what was happening near the gift table. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, and I knew this moment was going to become family legend, but not the kind my brother had planned for his wedding day. My sister-in-law made one last desperate attempt to fix things, offering to personally ensure I got a proper seat, promising that this would never happen again, practically begging me not to take the watch. She kept insisting it was all just a series of innocent mistakes that had somehow gotten out of hand. But I was done listening to excuses. I'd driven 800 miles to be here, taken time off work, spent nearly $7,000 on a gift, and bought a new suit for the occasion. In return, I'd been treated like an afterthought, stuck at the kids' table while they played with my expensive present. I told them both that they were absolutely right about one thing: I was low maintenance. So low maintenance, in fact, that I wouldn't be requiring anything from them going forward. No explanations, no apologies, no attempts to make it right. Just the return of my gift and my quiet exit from their celebration. Update 1. The drive home was 8 hours of processing what had just happened. I kept replaying the looks on their faces, the desperate scrambling, the way other family members had started whispering and pointing. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts that I ignored. By the time I reached my apartment, I had 17 missed calls from my brother, 12 from my sister-in-law, and a handful from various relatives who'd witnessed the scene. The voicemails ranged from angry to pleading to confused, but I deleted them all without listening completely. 3 days later, my brother showed up at my office. He looked terrible, exhausted, stressed, like he hadn't slept since the wedding. He begged me to meet him for coffee, said we needed to talk, insisted that his marriage was already suffering because of what happened. His wife was devastated. Their honeymoon had been ruined, and half the family was taking sides. Against my better judgment, I agreed to hear him out. We sat in a coffee shop near my office, and he laid out the whole story. According to him, his wife had been overwhelmed with wedding planning and had made the seating chart in a panic the night before. She'd genuinely run out of space and had stuck me at the kids' table thinking I'd be understanding about it. The gift opening had been her mother's idea, something about creating a better display for photos. He swore he'd known nothing about either decision until it was too late, and he was horrified when he realized what had happened. He kept emphasizing that I was his brother, that family meant everything to him, that he'd never intentionally disrespect me. I listened to his entire explanation without interrupting, then asked him one simple question. If the situation had been reversed, if I'd stuck him at the kids' table at my wedding while opening his expensive gift for display purposes, how would he have reacted? The question hung between us like a physical thing. He opened his mouth several times to answer, then closed it again, clearly struggling with the implications. Finally, he admitted he'd have been furious, probably would have done exactly what I did, maybe worse. That's when I knew my point had been made. Update 2. 6 months passed without contact from my brother's side of the family. The silence was actually peaceful. No more obligatory birthday calls. No more guilt trips about visiting more often. No more being treated as the convenient, low-maintenance family member who could be counted on to go along with whatever they decided. Then my mother got involved. She called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying that particular tone mothers use when they're disappointed but trying to sound reasonable. She'd been talking to my brother, she said, and felt like this whole situation had gone on long enough. Family was family, and holidays were coming up, and surely I could find it in my heart to forgive and move forward. I explained to her what had actually happened at the wedding, not my brother's sanitized version, but the real story. The deliberate dismissal, the assumption that I'd be fine with disrespectful treatment, the early opening of my gift while I was relegated to children's seating. There was a long pause before she responded. She hadn't known about the kids' table, she said. My brother had only mentioned that there'd been a misunderstanding about seating arrangements. Nothing about me being stuck with 6-year-olds while strangers got proper seats. The gift situation, she admitted, was harder to explain away. She asked if I really needed to be so harsh about it. Couldn't I understand that young couples make mistakes when they're overwhelmed with wedding planning? I reminded her that I was also young once, and had somehow managed to treat people with basic respect even when I was stressed. I pointed out that their mistake hadn't been random. They'd specifically chosen to disrespect me because they assumed I'd tolerate it quietly. The conversation ended with her saying she'd talk to my brother again, get the full story, and see if there was some way to bridge this gap. I told her she was welcome to try, but that my position hadn't changed and wouldn't be changing. Update 3. The breakthrough came 8 months later, in the most unexpected way. My sister-in-law's sister was getting married, and apparently, she'd put my sister-in-law in charge of some of the planning. During one of their preparation meetings, my sister-in-law suggested seating some of the less important family members at a smaller table in the back to make room for more prestigious guests. Her sister apparently lost her mind. She told my sister-in-law that she'd be horrified to treat any family member that way, that seating arrangements were about respect and inclusion, not convenience. She'd heard what happened at my brother's wedding and had been appalled by the whole situation. This led to my sister-in-law finally, truly understanding what she'd done. My brother called me that evening, and for the first time in our entire relationship, he sounded genuinely ashamed. His wife had broken down completely, he said, crying for hours as she realized the full implications of her actions. She'd been so focused on creating the perfect wedding aesthetic that she'd forgotten about treating people like human beings. They wanted to make it right, he said. Really make it right. Not just offer surface-level apologies and hope things went back to normal. I was curious enough to listen to their proposal. They wanted to host a family dinner, invite everyone who'd been at the wedding, and publicly acknowledge what they'd done. Not just a private apology, but a real recognition that their behavior had been unacceptable. They'd also insisted on replacing the watch, not because I demanded it, but because they understood now that they'd had no right to open it in the first place. More importantly, they wanted to have a real conversation about family dynamics, about the assumptions they'd made, and about how to rebuild trust going forward. I agreed to consider it, but with conditions. The dinner would happen at a neutral location, not their home. The apology would be genuine and specific, not some vague acknowledgement of misunderstandings. And there would be no pressure for immediate forgiveness. I needed to see sustained change in their behavior, not just pretty words. The dinner happened 3 weeks later at a nice restaurant with about 15 family members present. My sister-in-law stood up and delivered what was probably the most genuine apology I'd ever heard. She acknowledged exactly what she'd done wrong, why it was hurtful, and took full responsibility for her choices. She didn't make excuses or blame stress or wedding planning chaos. My brother followed with his own apology for not recognizing the problem sooner and for trying to minimize my concerns initially. He admitted that he'd been so caught up in his wedding day happiness that he'd failed to notice his own brother being disrespected right in front of him. The family members who'd witnessed the original incident also spoke up, admitting they'd felt uncomfortable about the kids' table situation but hadn't said anything at the time. Several of them apologized for their own silence and promised to speak up if they ever witnessed similar treatment in the future. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't immediately fix everything, but it was real. For the first time since the wedding, I felt like they actually understood the impact of their actions rather than just wanting me to get over it for everyone's convenience. I accepted their apologies, but made it clear that rebuilding our relationship would take time and consistent respectful behavior. They agreed, and to their credit, they've followed through. The new watch sits in my dresser drawer, still in its box. I haven't decided whether to keep it or return it yet, but the fact that they replaced it without being asked and understood why they needed to tells me more about their growth than any number of words could. My name is no longer scribbled on napkins at family gatherings. I get properly printed place cards at assigned seats with the other adults. It's a small thing, but it represents something much larger. The recognition that respect isn't optional, even for the low-maintenance family member. Sometimes the most important gift you can give someone is the gift of consequences. It teaches them that their actions matter, that other people's feelings matter, and that assumptions about who will tolerate disrespect are often dead wrong. The watch was expensive, but the lesson was priceless.